But wait, what's World of Warships? World of Warships is a naval action MMO, dipping into the world of large-scale sea battles of the first half of the 20th century. Epic battles range across the oceans of the world in order to claim victory among teams comprised of the greatest representatives from an era of multi-ton marine giants. In order to achieve victory in battle, players must enjoy a wide range of strategy and a variety of tactical decisions. Sudden ambushes, cunning flanking attacks, open confrontation, and head-on assaults. Captains must strive to find an ideal way to deliver a decisive blow at the enemy. Tactical diversity in World of Warships comes from the inclusion of many different classes of warships, including aircraft carriers capable of providing remote air support and striking targets at extreme range, colossal battleships that protect power across a vast swath of ocean, and light and heavy cruisers with the capability to respond quickly to changing battlefield conditions. Stealthy and agile destroyers can be highly effective in group attacks. So don't wait. Join World of Warships today for free and rule the oceans.
It was 1862, during the height of the American Civil War, in Birkenhead, England, on the River Mersey. She was built and launched by John Laird's Sons and Company. Launched as the Enrica, this new screw sloop of war would be better known as the CSS Alabama, and commissioned by the Confederate States Navy on August 24, 1862, under command by Captain Raphael Sims. The CSS Alabama became a very successful commerce raider, the scourge of the Union merchant and naval ships in the North Atlantic. Her motto was "Et toi et du toi," God helps those who help themselves. She displaced 1,050 tons, was 220 feet long, had a 31-foot 8-inch beam, a 17-foot 8-inch draft, and had two 150 horsepower horizontal steam engines with auxiliary cells. The 300 combined horsepower drove a single screw at a speed of 13 knots. She housed 145 officers and crew and was armed with 6 32-pound cannons, 110-pound cannon, and 168-pound cannon. She was originally known as Ship 290 in the shipyard. She launched as the Enrica on 15th of May, 1862, secretly leaving her berth on the 29th of July, 1862, under a civilian captain and crew to meet the Confederate naval personnel in the Azores. Captain Raphael Sims, aboard the steamer Bahama, arrived August 20th, 1862, to begin refitting the vessel and commissioned as the CSS Alabama, a naval cruiser that was designated a commerce raider for the Confederate Navy. She had 6 32-pound naval smoothbores for broadside engagements, but also had 2 more powerful pivoting cannons, one fore and one aft the mainmast, in a center line. They could rotate to fire either port or starboard, the foregun having a 178mm or 100-pounder 7-inch Blakely rifled muzzleloader, and the aft gun was an 8-inch or 203mm smoothbore. She also had a telescopic funnel so she could disguise herself as not being steam-powered. It was said the tune Dixie was being played as the quartermaster lowered the Enrique British colors. A signal cannon was fired, and the ship's new commissioning pennant and battle ensign were hoisted to the peaks of the mizzen gaff and the mainmast, thus donning the CSS Alabama. Captain Raphael Sims had only 24 officers, with many of his other personnel, 83 seamen, were actually mostly British. And most of those 83 stayed for the complete voyage of the Alabama. The CSS Alabama first 2 months were spent in the Eastern Atlantic, capturing and burning northern merchant ships. She arrived in New England region, sailing to the West Indies, looting and burning along the way. She then made her way into the Gulf of Mexico, or the Gulf of America, whatever. Then in January 1863, her first actual naval military engagement was with the USS Hatteras a Union sidewheeler, which the CSS Alabama actually overcome and sank off the Texas coast near Galveston. She captured the Hatteras' crew, then sailed across the equator, where she took on sizable conquests and prizes off the coast of Brazil. She then crossed the Atlantic once again, sailing along the west coast of Africa, continuing to harass Union commerce. She finally made it to Cape Town, South Africa, for a much-needed reprovisioning and retrofitting. She became the subject of an African folk song, Darcom de Alabama, a song still popular in South Africa today. The CSS Alabama then sailed to the East Indies, where she destroyed 7 more ships in a 6-month span, then returned to France around the Cape of Good Hope. She was constantly hunted by Union naval vessels, but each time she was spotted, she would vanish over the horizon. During her time raiding, the CSS Alabama burned 65 Union vessels, mostly merchant ships, but the crews of said ships were never harmed. They were only detained until they could be left aboard a neutral ship or left ashore in friendly or a neutral port. The Alabama performed 7 expeditionary raids all around the globe before her sailing to France for retrofit and repairs. The 7 raids were as follows: the Eastern Atlantic Expeditionary Raid from August to September 1862, where she captured and burned 10 prizes, mostly whalers. The New England Expeditionary Raid, which was October to November 1862, from New England to Bermuda, capturing 10 prizes, burning them, but released 3 others. Then there was the Gulf Coast Expeditionary Raid, December 1862 to January 1863, where she sank the USS Hatteras in an engagement aiding Confederate land forces during the Battle of Galveston. Then there was a South Atlantic Expeditionary Raid, February to July 1863, where she saw most success, taking 29 prizes off the Brazilian coast. She also recommissioned the Conrad as a CSS Tuscaloosa. Then there was the South African Expeditionary Raid, August to September 1863, off the African coast, where she worked alongside the CSS Tuscaloosa. The Indian Ocean Expeditionary Raid, September to November 1863, where she sailed 4,500 miles across the Indian Ocean, taking 3 prizes near the Sunda Strait while dodging the Union gunboat Wyoming. And finally, there was the South Pacific Expeditionary Raid, December of 1863, where she claimed a few more prizes in the Strait of Malacca before heading to France for repairs and refit. She was at sea 534 days out of 657, never seeing a Confederate port. She boarded around 450 vessels, capturing or burning at least 65 Union merchant ships, taking over 2,000 prisoners without any loss of life from said prisoners or her crew, an amazing feat, especially during wartime. She arrived in Cherbourg, France, June 1864, where Captain Sims requested permission to dry dock and overhaul the Alabama, but June 14, 1864, saw the Union sloop of war, the USS Kearsarge, commanded by Captain John Winslow, take up position outside the harbor while waiting for the sloop of war, the USS St. Louis, to aid in providing a blockade of the CSS Alabama, who now had nowhere to run. Captain Raphael Sims, not wanting the CSS Alabama interned by the French, issued through somehow diplomatic channels a challenge to Captain Winslow, stating, "My intention to fight the Kearsarge as soon as I can make the necessary arrangements. I hope this will not detain me more than until tomorrow or the morrow morning at farthest. I beg she will not depart until I am ready to go out. I have the honor to be your obedient servant, R. Sims, Captain." So on June 19th, 1863, the CSS Alabama sailed out to meet the USS Kearsarge in naval battle off the coast of France. The battle was witnessed by Edouard Monet, who wanted to paint the battle, and an English yacht captain who had given his children the choice between church or watching the ensuing battle. The CSS Alabama opened fire first as the Kearsarge was wheeling around to meet her. But the Kearsarge waited until the Alabama was within 1,000 yards before she opened up fire. Both ships steamed opposite courses in 7 spiraled circles, battling a southwesterly 3-knot current while trying to deliver a raking fire upon the other. In naval terms, they were both trying to cross the T, gaining a naval gunnery advantage in the fight. The Kearsarge demonstrated superior gunnery, while the Alabama had issues with deteriorated fuses and contaminated powder due to her long tour at sea. But the Alabama did land a 178mm Blakely rifle shot from her forward pivoting gun that binded the Kearsarge's rudder badly. If that shell had exploded, the Alabama would have sunk the Kearsarge, but the shot failed to explode. The Alabama's rapid gunnery was not very accurate, shooting high most times and never compromising the Kearsarge's side chain armor. Armor Captain Sims did not know the Kearsarge had, or he said he never would have engaged her. The Alabama's 32-pounders did damage the Kearsarge's armor belt 2 times, though it wasn't a very serious damage. After about an hour of engagement, the Alabama had been beaten down by the Kearsarge. The Kearsarge's superior and more powerful 11-inch 280mm Dahlgren's guns had pounded the Alabama into a sinking wreck, forcing Captain Raphael Sims to strike his colors and ask the Kearsarge for assistance. It was then said that Raphael Sims threw his sword into the sea, not giving Captain Winslow the honor of claiming his sword. It was said the Alabama fired 370 rounds at the Kearsarge, about 1 round per minute per gun, while the Kearsarge fired half that number, taking more careful aim. Of her 170-man crew, the Alabama suffered 19 fatalities, 9 killed, 10 drowned, and 21 wounded. 41 of Sims's crew, including Captain Sims, were rescued by a private yacht, the Deerhound, owned by John Lancaster, making Captain Winslow watch his adversary, Raphael Sims, get spirited off to England. Raphael Sims returned to the Confederacy, becoming an admiral during the last weeks of the Civil War. One story from the Alabama was its doctor, an Englishman, Dr. David Herbert Llewellyn, who saved the injured men from when the abandoned ship was sounded. He said that I would not peril the wounded, and he didn't. Unfortunately, he could not swim and drowned as a result when the Alabama went down. His heroism didn't go unnoticed, though. His native village gave him a memorial window and tablet at the Easton Royal Church. The CSS Alabama did cause some diplomatic issues for the Union and England, for she had cost the Union $6 million in damages, $121 million in today's money. This caused the U.S. to pursue what was called the Alabama claims against the United Kingdom. A joint arbitration was awarded to the U.S. $15.5 million in damages. Ultimately, the CSS Alabama and other commerce raiders failed to draw away Union ships from the blockade, which they were primarily intended to do. The Union having the major advantage in shipbuilding and the ability to sustain a blockade indefinitely. The CSS Alabama is the subject of the sea shanty Roll Alabama Roll, which is now used by the Alabama Crimson Tide in a slightly changed version, Roll Tide Roll. This was also the basis of a 2014 record by the British folk band Bellowhead. Also, the African song Dare Calm de Alabama was also inspired by the CSS Alabama, a song still famous in South Africa today. Furthermore, Jules Verne, the author of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, that was wrote in 1869, stated clear links between the Alabama's sinking and Captain Nemo's final attack in the book where he commanded the Nautilus. Raphael Sims has heavy influence in Mobile, Alabama, and the surrounding area, with hotels, restaurants, and even communities bearing his name. The Alabama's final resting place was found in 1984, with France and the U.S. both combining to declare it a protected wreck where they both oversee the Alabama's final port of call off the coast of France. The CSS Alabama, captained by Raphael Sims, was the most successful of the Confederacy's merchant commerce raiders, but ultimately the size and might of the fledgling U.S. Navy was more than she could bear, and eventually it brought about her downfall in the battle with the USS Kearsarge off the coast of France. Though what she accomplished was nothing short of amazing during the beginning of the steam-powered era of naval vessels worldwide. And please hit subscribe, like, and hit that noti bell. It sure helps out the channel. And thank you again for listening. I'm Big Duke 6 for CoolKegs Productions.